Hi, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. On tonight's episode, we talk with Ted Terry, mayor of Clarkston, Georgia, who's running for U.S. Senate from Georgia. Enjoy. Hey everyone, this is Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm Kelly, and I'm here with my co-host Sophie. Hey, Sophie.
Hey, Kelly.
And joining us tonight is a returning guest. We have Mayor Ted Terry, the mayor of Clarkston, Georgia, who is also running for U.S. Senate from Georgia. Hi, Mayor Ted.
Hey, Kelly. Hey, Sophie. How y'all doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us again. So last time we talked, it was quite a while ago, and we were talking about being mayor of a small town, but now you are running for Senate. So why don't you give us sort of the quick version of who you are and why you're running for Senate?
Right, thank you. Mayor Ted Terry, the mayor of Clarkston, Georgia, and Clarkston is known as the most ethnically diverse square mile in America. We're a town about 20 minutes east of downtown Atlanta in the suburbs. And we have been welcoming refugees for the last 35 plus years. And as a result, Clarkston's population is 50% foreign born, and we're a majority minority city. And so we have all the major religions, 40 nationalities, 60 languages spoken in our small town. And, you know, one of the reasons that we are running is because we believe that the things that we stand for in Clarkston about being more welcoming and more inclusive, that recognizing that the diversity of our cultures, our languages, our perspectives is our strength. And we think that it's made us stronger in Clarkston. And we've taken the opportunity to, you know, with this principle to bring people together and also pass very progressive legislation. I would put my record as mayor up against any other mayor and city in Georgia on being the most progressive city. Clarkston was the first city in Georgia to decriminalize marijuana possession, the first city to pass a $15 minimum wage, and the first city to make Election Day a holiday. And we did that all on one council night 3 years ago. And it set off a wave of progressive change. Today, almost 10 cities, from the big city of Atlanta and Augusta and Savannah to the small town of Ludowici, 10 cities have passed decriminalization of marijuana ordinance based on our original legislation, covering almost 1 million people. And, you know, let's be clear, this is a way to reduce mass incarceration, is a criminal justice reform measure that is impacting almost 1 million people living in those cities. And so we're proud to be leaders. I'll also just mention that that we are one of the few cities in Georgia and almost about 100 plus cities in Georgia that are planning for a 100% clean energy future. And we are working on a transition plan, community-led process right now on how to move us, you know, off of fossil fuels and into the energy of the future. And also just earlier this year, we passed, we were the third city in Georgia, working with City of Doraville and City of Atlanta, to pass a sweeping civil rights and non-discrimination ordinance, particularly geared at protecting our LGBTQ residents from discrimination by private businesses. And we created a mechanism that would not result in someone, you know, filing a federal lawsuit for discrimination, but they could do it through our city legal process, and it would provide basic protections from businesses for discriminating based on things such as gender identity or sexual orientation. And finally, I'll just say that, you know, I'm 36. I'm a millennial. I've worked for a lot of politicians, some great, some not so great, and I can tell you firsthand that most politicians are full of shit. And so it's really important for voters, for progressives, to recognize that campaigning is about vision and about talking about what you want to do and what you believe in. But don't just believe what the politicians say. Look at what they've done, and then you will know where they stand on the issues. And I'm running on my record as mayor of Clarkston, Georgia. What I have done, you know what I will fight for, because I fought for it in the city of Clarkston, and I'll fight for it in the United States Senate.
So you mentioned being a millennial. I'm a millennial too. And actually, my husband is a millennial and he's the same age as you. And so the average age of an American is about 38, but the average age of a senator is 62. So senators are overwhelmingly older than sort of the general population. Can you talk about the importance of having some younger senators in the conversation?
Of course. Well, look, it's an old saying, but if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I can, speak firsthand as, someone who's in the millennial voting bloc. By the way, the largest voting bloc in America is the millennial voting bloc. 80 million Americans are voting age eligible by 2020. This is the first time that the younger generation actually literally has the numbers and the power to get that seat at the table. And so, it's possible more millennials will be running for Senate around the country. But as far as I know, I'm the only millennial, maybe one of a handful of millennials that are running for United States Senate. The perspective is huge. And look, we've been on the menu for the last 30 years. Huge chunks have been taken out, have been bitten out of us, whether it's student debt, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's access to health care, whether it's non-discrimination protections. Our issues have been the last to be heard and to actually, have legislation passed. And so, obviously that's going to be sort of the lens at which I judge all legislation and what I advocate for is from my perspective as a young person in America, a generation that is the most diverse generation in American history. And my friends, my colleagues, the people that I have worked with over the years come from all different backgrounds. And Clarkston, as an example, is such a diverse place. And they've reelected me twice. And when you bring people together, regardless of age, and we talk about the issues and you're not afraid to be bold and be progressive and stand up for what you believe in and fight for it, then we're not going to get, people motivated to see that we can change the status quo, that we can disrupt the conventional wisdom and actually make change happen in the Senate.
I think the Democratic Party right now has sort of an existential crisis going on between, how do we win elections, especially in places like Georgia? Do we go really progressive, lean into that, and try to get more people excited and voting, or do we sort of tack to the center and try to pick up some sort of quasi-Republicans and independents? And in a place like Georgia, this is really important. So obviously, you're sort of leaning into progressive ideas and values, and those are your ideas and values. So talk to me about how that leads to winning an election in a place like Georgia.
The Republican Party, led by Senator David Perdue in this next election, and Donald Trump, their whole electoral strategy is to turn out their base, and they're going to do it by trying to scare the crap out of them, and they're going to spend everything and say anything, regardless of whether it's true or not, to win. And we have to recognize that, particularly in Georgia, the numbers of young voters, of a diverse group of voters, of Democratic voters, potential Democratic voters, those numbers are already there. Stacey Abrams proved that by running as a bold progressive and talking to people who don't usually get talked to. So, campaigns have two sort of fundamental strategies. Do you spend a lot of money trying to persuade someone to come back to your side? Maybe they're, a Trump voter who's considering voting for Trump again, but maybe they're on the margins, but you don't really know. You just have to do a general sort of, we're going to try to persuade people to vote, to come back over to our side. But I think the problem what happens is you end up going, almost to the center and sometimes center right on some issues and equivocating and triangulating and not actually being for policies that are largely popular. And this comes to talking about universal background checks, talks about universal health care coverage, talks about investing for clean energy and dealing with climate crisis. And so we need to be unafraid to run on the issues, one, that we know are popular, but also the ones that are Democratic base, young people who are disaffected, people who are on the margins in our society who have not been engaged. We have to recognize that they're looking for a candidate that represents them. And they haven't been seeing it, I think, with the usual the conventional wisdom in Georgia up until when Stacey Abrams ran. So, I can say that the numbers are there. The turnout is going to be even higher. And then also, look, we got data geeks on our team. We've run the numbers. We're looking at, almost 100,000 people that voted, for the first time in 2008, probably Barack Obama voters, who haven't voted since. And those people, that's a broad coalition. That is a diverse coalition of voters who, have voted once but haven't been engaged since. And we don't know why that is, but we have to go and talk to them. And then finally, one last little piece of data that's, I'll geek out on is, we know that Georgia has grown a lot. And we've actually been able to target down to the zip code and precinct level all of the new residents to Georgia that are not registered to vote and are likely Democrats. And that's because they were Democrats in other states. And, there's data sharing across, all the whole country now. And so, we have, mapped, literally 446,000 likely Democrats who are not registered to vote, but live in Georgia. They're Georgia residents. And, those are the type of new residents who are watching things like the heartbeat bill that passed the Georgia legislature, to see some of the rhetoric coming from David Perdue and Donald Trump, and saying, this is like, these Republicans are not like Republicans from my part of the country. These are like some of the most radical right-wing Republicans we've ever seen. And so they don't share they don't share their values, and they're more likely to, vote Democratic.
So you had mentioned sort of the things that people are really worried about, and really thinking about the issues that they're thinking about. What would you say are the top few issues that you're hearing from Georgians right now?
Well, it's a couple of things. First off, I was on I'll just mention the most recent. I was on the coast last week, just really as Dorian was being sort of announced that it was headed towards the coast. And I was on Jekyll Island. I was in Brunswick, Georgia. That's down in Glenn County, an hour or so from the Florida line. And, look, I mean, everyone was talking about the hurricane and, what's going to happen if it hits. It's one of the strongest hurricanes we've ever seen, in recent memory. The waters are warmer off the Atlantic coast. It's in some ways it's slowing the hurricanes down. It's making that hot water is making them even stronger and more devastating. And, there are parts of Georgia that are still recovering from these superstorms, and then also recognizing how expensive it is to build a more resilient infrastructure and to clean up and to fix the things that have been damaged, hundreds of millions of dollars in repairs. And so, they're concerned about climate change. They're concerned about how to actually live in a world that's going to have more floods, more heat waves, stronger storms, and how they're going to pay for it. Because, the other side of that is rural Georgia. And I've been to, a few places now. Was in Covington, Georgia, at the Future Farmers of America, campground and facility over there, meeting with Democrats and also local people. And, look, farmers are hit from all sides. And there's just a general sense in rural Georgia that they feel like they've been forgotten, and that people aren't, recognizing the talent and the skills and the opportunity that does exist in those counties. But because it's not Metro Atlanta, the investment dollars aren't going there. And so we need to recognize there's a lot of people around Georgia who, quite frankly, feel forgotten. And I don't think Republicans have, provided the best way forward. They talk about rural values, but they haven't actually delivered on them. And so that's an area I think, that Democrats should be more cognizant of. And we should, again, try to talk to people, engage people who haven't been engaged. They might not be strong Democrats, but they're definitely not Republicans. And they're looking, I think right now, a lot of people are shopping around for a new party in some of these areas.
You are in a town, obviously, with a huge refugee population. And, I think we've seen in Clarkston that refugee population can really be a driver of the economy and can help make the community actually safer. How do you bring that message to the larger America? People are so scared right now. There's so much fear and division. Refugees and immigrants are being blamed for so much that isn't really their fault. But how do you help a larger population understand the value of having refugees and welcoming immigrant communities?
By example, in a lot of ways, Clarkston is a glimpse of a future America that's a lot more diverse ethnically, language-wise, religiously, and we can, just say firsthand, about our experiences. And, there's hard data that shows that when immigration and refugee resettlement went up in Clarkston, particularly at the end of the George W. Bush years and into the Obama years, the crime rate went down in Clarkston, and it went down in nearby Decatur, Georgia, and in nearby Stone Mountain, Georgia. And so we can literally say that as we got more diverse and more refugees, our city became safer. We were consistently ranked one of the top 50 safest cities in Georgia, 2015, 16, 17. And so, we have that record. And then, look, we've got, the really interesting thing, and I always like to, quote Mark Twain on this, because Clarkston is an example of this, but he said that travel is fatal to bigotry, prejudice, and narrow-mindedness, and that one cannot develop broad, wholesome views of the world by vegetating in one's own corner for one's entire life. And the bumper sticker is travel is the only cure for ignorance. And in a place like Clarkston, you can travel in a sense and interact with people from different cultures who speak different languages, have different backgrounds and perspectives. And you can really learn a lot. And one of the things that I think that we've showcased in Clarkston is that, yes, we have different, the different names for God, and different customs and cultures and food and music and different backgrounds. But we're human beings, that we have a shared humanity. There is an underpinning and a common principle among all of us that we should treat others how we want them to be treated, and how we want to be treated as well. And that's what has guided us to be a more compassionate and welcoming community. And, so look, it's not for everyone, but, what I can say truthfully is that when people come to Clarkston and they, have this opportunity to, travel, it takes a chip off of bigotry. It takes a chip off of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. It opens people's minds. And I have seen the transformation of people who at first were like, I think these refugees are, a real problem, to becoming some of the most vocal and supportive of being a part of the refugee resettlement program and supporting that effort, which, and remember, in order to immigrate to America as a refugee, you have to go through 22 redundant security checks and background checks. It is literally one of the hardest ways that you can legally immigrate to America. 1% of refugees worldwide get resettled to only about 18 countries. And, it was a bipartisan thing going back to Ronald Reagan or Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, up through the Bushes, the Clintons, Bush and Obama. America was always the leader in refugee resettlement, rescuing people who, because of their religion, because of their political affiliation, because of their identity, had a well-founded fear of persecution and had to flee their homes, their national boundaries, and basically wait in a refugee camp for the hope of one day returning to their home. But we know the sad reality is that the average refugee is in a camp for 17 years and will probably in their lifetime never get a chance to actually go back home. And so being a part of this resettlement program is so important. And we're probably going to hear in the next few weeks that the Trump administration is going to lower the refugee numbers even lower. It's already been at the lowest level in the history of the program, 40 plus years of refugee resettlement, and Trump has set it at the lowest level. And they've even floated the idea of creating the policy that says 0 refugees at the end of 2019 and into 2020 would be admitted into America. And this is at a moment we are at the worst refugee crisis in modern history. 100 million people are either internally displaced, asylum seekers, or refugees.
You were on Queer Eye a couple seasons ago, and I believe on that episode you actually rapped at some point. Are you going to do that at all in this in this campaign?
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. You will see lots of rapping coming from me. No, probably not. But if an outside group wants to say, invite all the candidates for office to do a rap battle, I'm game. I would love to do a rap battle with David Perdue. Yeah, most definitely. Sign me up.
All right. I think Two Broads is going to host a rap battle for the Georgia Senate race.
I'm here for that.
Just give me like 24 hours notice so I can prepare.
So, Ted, if people are interested in helping out your campaign, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can check out tedforgeorgia.com. I've got my campaign video, my my bio, my accomplishments, the issues I'm running on, my record as the mayor of Clarkston. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even on LinkedIn. I totally forgot LinkedIn existed until I discovered I had 150 unread messages and 1,000 invitations. So yes, LinkedIn does still exist, people. But yeah, just you can just Google Ted Terry on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you'll find me. And yeah, if anyone has any feedback, some questions, advice, ideas, if you live in Georgia, if you're like, I want you to come to my town or my county, just reach out, send us an email at Ted for Georgia. It's info@tedforgeorgia.com, or send us a DM through social media, and we'll be happy to, to talk and find a way to come out and visit you.
And just so people are clear, there's now 2 Senate seats open in Georgia, but there's 1 Senate seat open and 1 that you're challenging, but you are running against David Perdue.
That's right. I'll be qualifying in March for the David Perdue seat. And then it's unclear when the qualification for Isaacson's seat will be, but that will be, as people have called, or it's known as the jungle primary. So there is no primary. There's just everyone's on the ballot all at once. So yeah, I don't want to enter into that fray. So I'm going to go after the most conservative, anti-immigrant, right-wing senator that no one's ever heard of, but they will definitely be hearing more about him because the way we flip the Senate and bring back representation, honorable, inclusive, transparent representation is to defeat David Perdue.
All right. Excellent. Well, Ted Terry, thank you so much. I have a son named Teddy, so he is always super excited when he hears about candidates that share his name. So you definitely have a 7-year-old rooting for you from Chicago.
Well, and as the next United States Senator with Ted, I will try to restore honor back to the name of Ted. I know Ted Cruz has kind of given us a bad rap, but hey, I'll still work with Ted Cruz. I'll work with anybody in the Senate to try to get things done, even if I don't like his beard and even if he's given Ted a bad name. But yeah, I appreciate that. Say hi to Teddy for me.
All right, I will. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight, and we'll put your information on our website so people can check you out.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.